Peeps, there's new MIMIGHOUL cards.
Yes!
Good afternoon, Jank enthusiasts. I'm MBT, and this is 10-minute testing. It's finally happened. After years of begging Konami to please take pity on us humble Americans, our pleas have been heard. Strap in and pay homage to Cleaverman because there's a promising second wave of support in town, and it's for MIMIGHOUL.
Haven't you ever seen a ghoul before?
So here's the list, handed to me by Peeps Yu-Gi-Oh! As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. But first, this video is sponsored by Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck. I've been shilling Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck for, well, years at this point, and I'm happy to announce I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. By now, they've become the most complete repository of tournament tops on the internet, the best place to jam prog with friends, and of course, still host strategy articles. Recently, they've added a new piece of infrastructure to the fold, a 3-card arena draft, draftable with card pools featuring classic formats, Master Duel, or within any parameters you like. Give it, or any of their other features, a look at www.ygoprodeck.com. With that, let's mess with MIMIGHOUL. If you're unfamiliar, MIMIGHOUL is the newest TCG exclusive archetype. Hot off the heels of Tistina, it's a series of mimics designed to be donated to your opponent, then catch them by surprise with massive downsides when they're opened. It's a really cool kind of gameplay, and the first series of cards had all the makings of a competent archetype. A field spell that searched and did a little floodgating, a Stratos, a welcome labyrinth. The pieces were all there. There just weren't enough of them. Because of this, the first wave of decks looked like control strategies straight out of 2021. 30 traps and a dream making up for a lack of playables. Then, as the new set loomed, disaster struck. MIMIGHOUL Charm was revealed, and it was terrible. An awful piece of support that prognosticated the worst. A new, useless direction for the archetype, and a wholly unplayable card. As we loaded into the reveal stream, we all expected the next Tistina. But we were rewarded with the next Gold Pride. Lo and behold, Charm was the worst of the bunch, and the only card without a new home in the list. The second wave of support was banger after banger, guaranteed setup through Maker with Slime, Extenders with Fairy, and most importantly, something to actually do with your monsters, with 2 separate rank ones. Ultimately, the deck has transformed into a strategy that really feels like a 2024 archetype. Like snakes, it sets up an innocuous end board, Mask, Throne, Maker, Room, and Dungeon, that is nonetheless game-winning, representing a half-dozen layered points of interaction. I should note that the engine requirements range from 18 to 24 cards, leaving tons of space for the requisite non-engine the format demands, or a side engine like Kashtira or Labyrinth. But for our purposes, we're playing pure. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First up, previously on MIMIGHOUL. We've got 1 copy of Master, 3 copies of Dragon, 2 copies of Archfiend, 3 copies of Room, and 3 copies of Dungeon. We're also playing Maker again, but its utility has completely changed, so we're going to devote some time to talking about it. Let's go over the new MIMIGHOULs. We've got 3 copies of Fairy, 1 copy of Slime, and 1 copy of Armor. We're playing all of these individual cards because each one of the new MIMIGHOULs has an effect that allows you to special summon it from your hand face up to your field, which is awesome. You have something to do with the creatures and the Xyz monsters, so the more extenders you can load up on, the better. The downside is that each one of these monsters has a different condition that permits them to be summoned to your side of the field. Fairy has the easiest condition, you just have to control a MIMIGHOUL monster, and her effect to summon to your opponent's side of the field and then flip isn't terrible. It prevents your opponent from activating the effects of monsters special summoned from the hand, so there are some matchups in which this actually does something. We have 1 copy of Slime, which unfortunately has the hardest one of these to chew through. Your opponent has to control more monsters than you, which going first is all but impossible. Going second is usually on, but this isn't going to be a difference maker versus an established board. It's in here mostly because it's fantastic off of Maker, which we'll talk about in a second, and Armor is almost always on. Your opponent has to have a monster in face-down defense position. Let's talk about MIMIGHOUL Maker. So, MIMIGHOUL Maker reveals 2 flip monsters with different names from your deck. Randomly, your opponent picks 1 as special to their field and face down defense position, then you add the other to your hand, then you can special summon a MIMIGHOUL monster from your hand. Doesn't have to be the same MIMIGHOUL, which means there's a lot of scenarios where these MIMIGHOULs from the first series of support that do not have a special summon condition from the hand can just be cheated out using this card. This card was in the deck prior, and it's okay, but it's hard to describe why. Having the random element meant that sometimes it just wasn't a starter. You would activate it, give your opponent the wrong one of the two Mimighouls, and just kind of have an extra guy on field with no Xyz to speak of, so there wasn't even anything you could do with the body. Everything changes with the advent of Slime. Now, Mimighoul Maker can be activated, almost always choosing exactly Mimighoul, Archfiend, and Mimighoul Slime. If you get the Archfiend, you're in a great position. You can trigger the effect of the Archfiend to target your opponent's Slime they just set, then it flips up, changes to your field, and allows you to special summon an additional Mimighoul from your deck. Really, really fantastic. If you give them Archfiend, you're still in a pretty good position because Archfiend is the Mimighoul you want them to end on. It's the one with the most impactful effect and can be triggered both on your turn and your opponent's turn, provided some conditions are met. Finally, we are playing 2 copies of Mimighoul Fork. This card, I'm not totally sold on. You can target a face-down monster your opponent controls. Your opponent chooses one of the following effects, and then you apply that effect. Change it to face-up attack or defense position, or send it to the graveyard that its owner draws 2 cards, and then you can banish it and grab another Mimighoul Fork from your deck. I think I'm playing it for the reason that Peeps identified in the reveal stream, which is Mimighoul Dungeon is a starter. Mimighoul Maker is a starter, which means when you get to your monsters that search Mimighoul cards, you really only have one target, and that's Mimighoul Room. And often you open Mimighoul Room or have 2 searches available. So what are you going to do with it? Well, Mimighoul Fork is a pretty good card because you go through so many Mimighouls over the course of your combo, you're pretty likely to draw into non-engine, which can be game-winning with a full setup. I don't hate it, but at the same time, I understand it is functionally just trade-in with setup because your opponent is never going to allow you to trigger the effects of the Mimighoul. They're always cashing out. For non-engine, we're playing 3 copies of Infip, 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 1 copy of Called by the Grave, 3 Fuwa Ross, 4 Bestials, and 3 Nibiru. In the extra, we're on the usual suspects. Access code Underworld Goddess could probably be a Link 3 because this deck kind of has problems OTKing, and getting like another monster for the access code to banish that happens to push it to 53 might be more important than that card. Nightmare Phoenix, Barricade Board Blocker, SP Little Knight, IP Masquerena, Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, Mimighoul Dragon is a Dragon, 1 copy of Anima, and then Downard Zeus, Lyrilisk Assembled Nightingale. 2 apiece of these new guys. Giant Mimighoul. It says that your Mimighoul monsters that aren't Xyz can attack directly if your opponent controls a face-down monster, and when Xyz summoned, you can add a Mimighoul card from your deck to your hand. This is great. It's fantastic. It's a mechanism by which you can get a room in hands that otherwise don't have them. You can detach a material from this card, then target face-up cards in the field up to the number of face-down monsters your opponent controls, destroy them, and inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent for each card destroyed. That's each card destroyed, not each one of their cards destroyed, which means this deck also now has a time win con. Thank you. Finally, Mimighoul Throne is the pièce de résistance. You can detach a material from this card to summon a Mimighoul Master from your hand or deck or graveyard, and then during the main phase, you can target a Mimighoul Master you control, equip this card to an equip spell that gives it 1,000 attack, then return cards from the field to the hand up to the number of materials this card had. That's right, it is functionally a non-targeting double compulse, or a single compulse if you've summoned the Master and not searched him over the course of your combo. This card's crazy. In the side deck, we've got 3 copies of Dimension Shifter. I don't love playing this main. It's kind of hard to describe, but the deck does need the graveyard. It's one of those situations where it hurts your opponent more than you, but it does have an impact on what you're able to accomplish. The reason that we are playing it in the side is not only the inherent nombo with a lot of our stuff, but also one of the top decks, Ritual Beast, actually prefers to play under Dimension Shifter with a lot of their openers, and another one, Tenpai, doesn't care at all. We've got 2 copies of Lightning Storm, 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. There can be only 1, triple Perulia, and triple Droll and Lockbird. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against Zombie Horus. Pour one out for all our fallen comrades. This deck was taken out back for the sins of others. Crystron Halka-Fibrax and Chaos Ruler were their 2 best cards. We're going to begin with a copy of Mimighoul Dragon, which is going to eat an effect failure if we didn't have a called by. All right, we're going to use that dragon in order to grab from deck to hand a copy of Maker. Let's fire off the Maker. We'll pick our 2, and our opponent thankfully gets the Slime. We'll special out an Archfiend, and then we'll trigger the effect of the Archfiend, targeting the Slime, which will flip up and activate its effect, putting it on our side of the field alongside an armor. We're going to overlay for a copy of Giant Mimighoul, and the only one we don't have in rotation yet is our copy of Fairy, so we can use the Mimighoul Dungeon to grab that. Next, we're going to overlay for a Throne, activate the effect of the Throne, out comes the Maker. We'll activate the effect of the Maker, and we will grab from deck to hand another copy of Dragon, so we have follow-up for next turn. Finally, we're going to special out the Fairy and go into an IP Masquerena, set 1 card, then activate Archfiend in order to give it to our opponent before passing. Our opponent's going to draw for turn, and that's an interesting one. They're going to begin with a copy of Imseti, pitching a Kebesenuf, I believe. Next, King Sark into Kebesenuf allows us to go Maker. We'll go Maker, flip up Archfiend. He'll trigger the effect of the Archfiend, pitching a Necro World Banshee, which is funny, and getting an Insetti. They're going to go for this copy of Gozuki. We will activate Room. That's an Ignition, isn't it? Put that sucker face down. Next, we'll go for Dragon. We'll trigger the effect of the Dragon for a Maker for next turn. They're going to go King Sark to send a copy of Happy and summon it before going to the battle phase and realizing they can't attack because of MIMIGHOUL Dungeon. They'll make a copy of the Zombie Vampire, and now it is SP Little Night time. We're going to banish this copy of Happy and chain the effect of our MIMIGHOUL Throne in order to put back this copy of the Zombie Vampire. Finally, our opponent's going to go King Sark into a copy of Duamateth. We should be able to clean up pretty easily from here. We're going to go for Dragon. We're going to activate the effect of the Dragon. That'll grab us a copy of MIMIGHOUL Fork. Then we will activate the effect of the Dungeon and the effect of Archfiend as well, giving it to them. Next, we'll go Fork to target the Archfiend. They will send it to the graveyard. We'll draw 2, and they'll trigger the effect of the Duamateth. I didn't know you could do that. We draw into a Druis Worm, which is funny. We'll go Fork to grab a Fork, and then afterwards we'll just overlay for a copy of Giant MIMIGHOUL, activate the effect in order to grab a Fairy, activate the effect of Giant MIMIGHOUL to get rid of this zombie world so the Gozuki won't trigger, and then make access code Talker. We will send this copy of Duamateth, and we'll activate the effect of the access code Talker in order to pop the last remaining card on the field. We'll go to the battle phase and hit in for well over lethal. So that last game showcased the strength of the end board, but for this second game I want to showcase exactly the strength of the field spell. MIMIGHOUL Dungeon's lock is so powerful some decks literally can't play through it, including our opponent's list, which is at Emancipator. I'm leading this turn a little weird because I'm trying my hardest to play around Droll. Droll absolutely cooks this deck alive. You can't even activate Maker under it, actually. So we're going to lead Maker. It doesn't pay out, but we can still use the 2 monsters for Giant, which gets us where we need to be with the Room. After no Droll, we can of course commit to the MIMIGHOUL Dungeon, into the Dragon, into the Fork. From here, we're going to go Fairy, summon it to our side of the field, and then we overlay for a copy of Throne, activate the effect of the Throne, summon a Master, then trigger the effect of the Master. We are going to go ahead and grab another copy of Dragon for next turn. We'll Armor here and maybe try and draw into some hand traps off of the Fork. Our opponent actually elects to flip it up. Oh, okay, sure. We'll take it back, activate Fork to get another Fork, and then we can go into a copy of IP Masquerena as part of our end board. Let's pass back to our opponent, who draws for turn. They're going to begin by special summoning a copy of Analyzer. We will activate MIMIGHOUL Room to tuck that sucker face down, specialing the Dragon and flipping that, activating Dragon in order to grab a Maker, at which point they literally cannot do anything. None of the cards in their hand can be normal summoned. We'll Room here in order to bounce the Dragon back, then perform a normal summon on the Dragon to get another copy of Room. Let's Fork that card and oh, right, it doesn't work like that. It turns out, actually, it has to be my monster for me to draw the cards. We Maker, and this time we do hit. We're going to go for Archfiend targets Slime. Slime comes to our side of the field, and let's just make access code Talker. We shouldn't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We'll get in for well over lethal. So it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent's on Melodious, and okay, I know Melodious isn't like meta, but give me a break. I was on a time crunch. You can see our opponent has Droll and Lockbird, and hopefully this game will display why I played around it in every single one of those games. Our opponent's going to begin with a copy of Couplet effect in order to grab a Concerto, normal summon a copy of Refrain, activate the Refrain effect, and then afterwards going to activate Concerto to make Baka Baka Baka. Baka here is going to trigger, as will both of the Pendulum Scales, putting themselves back in the scales before Baka summons a Tam Tam from deck. Tam Tam is going to go ahead and grab a copy of Polly, and then Refrain targeting the Baka in order to send an Aria. They're going to go for the Polly here into Flowering Etoile. That'll trigger both the effect of the Baka and the effect of the Concerto and the effect of the Tam Tam. Will take 500 here. They'll summon out the Shapina and activate the Shapina effect in order to grab this copy of Aria back, then special summon out the Aria and the 2 Sopranos. They'll activate the effect of the Soprano, grabbing back this copy of Tam Tam, then Soprano effect in order to make a Schuberta before passing. We'll draw for turn, and well, we're going to begin with a copy of Terraforming and walk straight into Droll and Lockbird. So not only is the MIMIGHOUL Dungeon off, so is MIMIGHOUL Maker. So the best we can do here, I think, is give our opponent a face-down monster and then threaten Lyralisk. They are going to bite, and we're going to scoop. So it's time for game 2, and our hand looks pretty darn good. We're going to begin with a copy of MIMIGHOUL Maker, still a little scared of that Droll. We give them an Archfiend and us a Slime. Shoot. Okay, well, we're going to go for Dungeon afterwards. Thankfully, no Droll and Lockbird, so we are going to get to grab this copy of Dragon, activate the effect of the Dragon in order to grab from deck to hand a copy of Fork, then Armor, summoning itself to our side of the field. From here, we'll activate Fork, targeting our opponent's monster, and unwittingly turning on this Infip. There's a lot of corner case scenarios you need to start planning for that I am not doing yet. Still a little green on the deck. We'll walk this Giant MIMIGHOUL into an Imperm and then end on IP Pass. Woof. Our opponent's going to draw for turn. Afterwards, they are going to normal summon a copy of Refrain, one of 3 in their hand. We'll go Infip on the Refrain, and they will special summon out this copy of Sonata. From here, we're going to activate MIMIGHOUL Room in order to tuck that sucker face down and activate the effect of the Dragon. We will use the effect of the Dragon in order to grab from deck to hand a Maker for next turn. They'll go to the battle phase, but can't attack because of Dungeon, and we will draw for turn. A Fairy's a great one. We're going to begin with a copy of Maker, and this time we do hit. We give them a Dragon and us a Nightmare Archfiend, which we will special before activating its effect, flipping this dragon and blowing up the board. We'll take the dragon and go into Throne into Master, and then Master effect as well. Let's go ahead and grab another copy of Fairy before activating Fairy. We are just about out of Mimighouls, actually. We'll use Room to bounce back this copy of Dragon, then normal summon the dragon in order to grab from deck to hand another copy of Room. From here, we'll overlay for a giant Mimighoul, then activate the effect in order to grab another Fairy before going for Dungeon, adding back this copy of Armor. We'll eat our opponent's board, and then afterwards, we will just go ahead and set the Room. Pretty confident we're in a position where it's hard for them to win. We'll make a Zeus and pass turn here. Our opponent draws a pretty good one, but it won't really hold up to SP. Here, we're going to Ash Blossom the Refrain because we have so much interaction in our hand. They will couplet. We will Room in order to tuck this sucker face down, and then we will activate IP Masquerena for SP, at which point they'll scoop. So it's time for that all-important Game 3 and... oh god. Well, I guess when you play 19 pieces of non-engine, this is bound to happen eventually. Our opponent's going to begin by Herald of Orange Lighting our Fu Ross. Okay, we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! They're going to begin with a copy of First Movement Solo into a Refrain. Refrain will trigger here. They're going to go ahead and grab a couplet, at which point we will droll. How's that feel, sucker? They're going to go into a copy of Bloom Harmonist, pitching the couplet in order to summon a Soprano and an Elegy. Soprano here is going to cycle back the couplet, and Soprano will activate. Unfortunately, has to use herself, so very vulnerable to Nibiru. They'll pass turn here, and we need something. God. And we don't get it. Okay, let's normal summon the Fairy and go into Anima. Anima's going to target this copy of the token. We'll get in for 3. We will set this Room and make an SP, hoping for the best. Let's banish the Shopina so they can't cycle it. They'll draw for turn. A Concerto's a weird one. They'll lead First Movement Solo into an Aria. From here, they're going to go to the battle phase. We will Room here in order to special summon a copy of Dragon to our field and tuck that sucker face down so we can retain the SP Little Knight, and we'll grab a Dungeon for next turn. In main phase 2, they're going to go Couplet effect in order to grab a Concerto, then Concerto in order to make a copy of Baka, and unfortunately, this is full combo. They're going to go for both Scales and the effect of the Baka in order to summon a Refrain, and activate the effect of the Refrain to grab a copy of Couplet. From here, they can activate the effect of the Couplet in order to summon back this copy of Aria and make Bloom Harmonist once again. They'll trigger the effect of the Baka and the effect of the Bloom Harmonist and the effect of the Concerto. We chain SP in order to tag our board out for some unknown reason. Could be anything. Once again, they're going to go for the effect of the Soprano, and we'll go for the Nibiru. They're going to go ahead and grab a monster back to their extra, which they will Pendulum Summon here, the Refrain, and we get our entire board back. Should be able to clean it up from this position. We'll go Mimighoul Dungeon effect in order to grab a copy of Fairy. We'll activate Room to cycle this dragon, which we will then normal summon. Activate the effect of the dragon in order to grab a Maker. Then we'll fire the Maker in order to give our opponent... oh, the Archfiend again. Come on, I can't keep losing this 50-50. Let's overlay for a copy of Giant Mimighoul effect in order to grab an Armor. We'll activate the effect of the Giant Mimighoul in order to get rid of the Nibiru token. Not a lot of ways for us to get over that otherwise. Special summon out the Armor, and then special summon out the Fairy. From here, we can go into a copy of Throne, activate the effect of the Throne for a Master, then activate the effect of the Master in order to grab a copy of Archfiend. We'll finally link off for an access code Talker, targeting the SP Little Knight, then activate the effect in order to pop this Refrain. We'll get over this copy of Archfiend, get in for 43, and walk with it. So we're back with the deck, and I know Melodious isn't top tier, but give me a break. These cards have been out for a matter of hours. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1. The end board is layered. The previous Trap Heavy build folded immediately to a Lightning Storm, but this one sticks its points of interaction everywhere, from monsters to back row to your opponent's side of the field. 2, speaking of, the Dungeon Lock is incredible. A significant amount of decks really just don't have a convincing out to it and need their normal. And 3, it just feels good to play. I mentioned this in the deck profile, but it's become the type of capable, adaptable, options-oriented strategy that a modern deck demands. And the cons. 1, alright, we can't dance around this any longer. So there are these 2 cards in the format, Diabellstar and Dominus Purge, that interact with this deck in an extremely annoying way. The former can just send a face-down monster to the graveyard, outing the Dungeon Lock on her own, and the latter restricts the user from activating Earth monster effects ever again, meaning their copies of your mimics won't trigger. This isn't the end of the world. Neither the lock nor resolving Archfiend is mission critical, but it does mean that anyone packing these cards gets a couple of percentage points on you. 2, their boards are frustrating. I said earlier that their interaction was layered, but that was really only a half-truth. They're layered in terms of types of interaction, but to get the maximum amount of interaction out of it, here's something that's absolutely necessary for a low-ceiling deck like this. They have to be activated exactly in this order. Room, then Mask with the Room monster, then Throne. This inflexibility is a real problem if your opponent, say, leads Cosmic. And 3, there's RNG involved. Maker is a full combo no matter what post-slime print, but the strength of the end board varies pretty dramatically depending on what you hit. This sucks. It's not fun. All in all, I expect this deck to be playable, but certainly not tier 1. or really even Tier 2. It has a home at the local, regional, and yes, even YCS level, and the support is great, but Spiral, it is not. So that's that. A huge shouts out to the individuals who make these videos possible, most notably my Patreons. The high tier ones are in front of you right now, and I will read their names as contractually obligated. First up is Slifer274, followed by Elena Tincher, Alex Perea, Allison Elliott, Ally, Brett Henry, Darkmaster Zork, Derpin Dragon, Devin Senpai, DJ Elefante, FPS Lord Derp, John Piet, Killer Croc 467, Night Mary, Legal Rights, Lockstone, Luis Hernandez, Lullaby of Souls, Master of Faster, Matthew M. Derezzo, MBT Play Madolce, Mike Carlotti, N54 Lionheart, Nacho Gonzalez, Nebulo Yu-Gi-Oh!, Project Mercury, Rose Lapine, Troy Says By Erasure is Gay, Who's Nick, Wonder Waffle, Your Pot of Greed Does What, and Yuki. Couldn't have done it without you.